understand how to make your assets more or less invisible, how to protect those assets that you've spent your lifetime acquiring. Now, I have trained a lot of CPAs and tax attorneys, and many of them love my approach to asset protection. And so I collaborate with some of the top asset protection attorneys in America. And when we get together and talk about protecting the assets that are accumulated by some very high net worth clients, this is the actual way that we help a lot of people protect their assets. Now, it can be way more complicated than what I'm going to show you here, but get ready. I'm going to show you how to create firewalls of protection so that in the Sue Happy society we have become, it's going to be next to impossible for people to penetrate into your assets. So I'm Doug Andrew. I've been a financial strategist and retirement planning specialist now for 5 decades, helping thousands of people optimize assets, minimize taxes, but also helping them protect those assets. We have become a Sue Happy society, and in collaboration with many very sharp asset protection attorneys, I've been able to help thousands of clients protect those assets that they spend their lifetime accumulating. I'm going to simplify it and show you a few examples in this episode. So this is the diagram that one of my attorneys, Scott Solberg, prepared. And we can get way more complicated than this one, but hopefully this will give you a few epiphanies or ahas so that you don't have a bunch of liability exposure out there. So here we go. Many sharp attorneys may help you set up a living trust, a revocable living trust between you and your spouse. It could be an AB trust or a husband and wife trust. In my situation, I have a trust. My wife has a trust. I keep the business assets in my trust. My wife keeps the domestic assets in her trust. Why? Well, if somebody were to, get hurt, jumping on a trampoline in our yard or slipping on our front porch or whatever, the most they could go after is the value that's in the domestic assets in her trust if she was at fault. But if they try to come after our home for a business reason, that's off limits because I don't have the house in my trust. Now, sometimes attorneys will set up a revocable living trust, an AB trust, and they'll take a personal residence because it's one of the primary, assets in a lot of marriages, and they'll divide up the house into half is in one trust, half is in the other trust, or like an AB trust. Well, that splits the liability protection in half. For example, years ago, I had a gentleman where his wife, he was an anesthesiologist, and his wife was taking a bunch of young ladies that had just turned 16 and one had just got a driver's license, and they were going on this youth trip. And one of the young girls begged to drive the car. She let her, and she wrecked the car with the other girls in there. And one of the parents said that was irresponsible and sued her because her husband was an anesthesiologist for $5 million. Now, they had some insurance protection and what have you, but see, they went after her. Now, if they had their home in an AB trust, because she was the one at fault, the most that they could wipe them out would be half of the equity in their property if they owned their house outright. Now, what I recommend is you keep your house mortgaged to the hilt so that they can't come after the equity in your home. Who's going to sue you for the equity in your home if it's not there? But see, a trust is designed to sort of split the liability in half. I had another gentleman, he was a scout leader, and he got in a hurry and didn't file a tour permit with Boy Scouts of America back in the day. When you file a tour permit, every boy is automatically insured for $1 million of life insurance if there's a death on a scout trip. He didn't do that, and one of the boys did something stupid, jumped into a pool and died, drowned. Sad story, but because he did not file a tour permit to go up to the lake to do this, he was sued for the $1 million that he could have had on automatic life insurance. These things happen in life. And so they're going to go after the assets of the person who's responsible. In that case, if he had had a trust where the house was split up, the most they could go after would be half the value of the house if he had a trust. So that's why many times a trust will split the liability or protect half of your assets from being wiped out. So that's okay. A trust can sometimes protect being wiped out. The most they can sue you for is half of that if you have a trust. Otherwise, if you own your house in joint tenancy, both the husband and wife own it all. And so they can sue you. And this is a big mistake a lot of people make. They put their children's names on their trust deeds, on their homes, or on the actual deed to the home, or the bank accounts, thinking, oh, I'm going to avoid probate by adding my kid's name so that if we die, there's no question who gets it. We don't have to go through probate. Well, you solved the probate issue, but you just created a huge problem because you wouldn't believe how many times people have done that. And then one of their children gets in trouble with the IRS, or they're texting on the freeway and they don't have adequate car insurance. They cause an accident. And, it only takes a law firm less than probably 5 minutes to do a Google search. And, this young person owns 100% of a $1 million home in central Utah. Let's go after it. It's free and clear. And the parents go, that's not my son's home. We just added his name to the deed to avoid probate. Well, he's a joint tenant. That means he owns it all. See, a joint checking account means everybody can write out a check for everything in it. That's not smart. Not only that, but if the IRS finds out that you added your child's name to the property, you may owe a huge gift tax because you just gifted your child the value of that asset. If your home is $1 million and you added their name, they may come after you for a gift tax. See, people do things without thinking. So you need to make sure you do it the smart way. So I recommend, like many attorneys do, that you set up a trust and you have some liability protection. Now, I like to go several steps further to build firewalls of protection. So this is what I recommend, simply that many people ought to consider a family limited partnership. And this is for, let's say, your non-retirement assets. And this is where I put, a max funded indexed universal life policy, a laser fund. So it would go in this green one, and we set it up oftentimes in an Alaska trust. Now, what's an Alaska trust? Not necessary for many people, but I like them because in Alaska, it's next to impossible to penetrate an Alaska trust under normal law. And so you can protect it. You don't have to have a bunch of assets in Alaska. You could have a bank account up there or own one little piece of property to qualify for an Alaska trust because they're next to impossible to penetrate in courts of law. And they also allow a trust to go on into perpetuity. Whereas a lot of trusts up here in the red, the trust only lasts as long as the 21 years after the death of the youngest survivor when you pass away. So trusts end, whereas in Alaska, they go on forever. So there's a lot of reasons you can learn to maybe utilize an Alaska trust. I'm going to come back to this, but this is where I keep my laser funds, my indexed universal life. Now, if you have a home, you may want to have your home registered under a single member LLC in Wyoming because it doesn't have a state tax or whatever. Now, if you own other assets, let's say you have a cabin, and then you also have a rental home in Arizona. You have a commercial building, and let's say you have some boats. Whatever you have, I would recommend you set up limited liability companies, single member LLCs. Now, some people think this is overkill, but I'll give you a horror story right now. I owned a condo in southern Utah that I put into a rental pool when we weren't using it, and my friend did also. Now, the rental agency, the real estate management company rented it out, and they would take 40%, and my friend would get 60%. But the problem is my friend owned it outright, and they rented it out. The people who rented it went out for the evening and hired a babysitter. And so their children are there, and while the babysitter's taking care of their little kids, a young fellow who is going around I don't know whether he's delivering pizza or repair or whatever. He knocked at their door, and he notices this little gal babysitting, and that she's alone. Well, horrible. He goes in and rapes this little girl. Now, they sued not only the rental company, but the rental company only had so many assets, so they went all the way up the line, the deep pockets. They sued the owner of the condo, and their argument was, if you were going to rent it out, you had to have a peephole the height of a babysitter. So the babysitter wasn't tall enough to see through the peephole and open the door and was taken advantage of. Yep, they lost the lawsuit, but see, the attorney said, oh, look, not only does this condo owner own this condo and it's free and clear, let's go after this condo's worth $500,000, but look, they don't even have it in an LLC, or maybe it's in joint tenancy, or maybe it is in an LLC. Oh, look, they have 3 other properties in this LLC and they're all paid off. This is worth going after. It happens all the time. So let's suggest something different. Let's say that every one of their rental properties were in different LLCs. And now you have the same story. The only thing that they can get is the equity of that condo in that LLC. The others are off limits. So if you set up an LLC with just one asset in it, that particular rental property, the most they can get is the value of that LLC if that's protected. They can't go after all these other LLCs. They weren't involved. So far, so good. Now you've protected your other assets in other LLCs. I'd like to go one step further. I keep my rental properties mortgaged to the hilt. Again, who is going to sue you for your equity if it's not there? I keep mine mortgaged to the hilt, 80% loan to value on a first mortgage and the last 20%. I don't have any equity in those. Where's my equity? It's safely tucked up here in the green Alaska Trust in a max funded index universal life. Why? Because it's earning a rate of return 3 times greater than the cost of the mortgage down here. I'm making money by becoming my own banker, but it's going to be next to impossible to penetrate in that Alaska Trust. But even if they did, it's next to impossible to penetrate money inside of a life insurance policy, because case law says you can use all kinds of formulas to say, nope, that's off limits. Most sharp attorneys won't even attempt to go after assets in an Alaska Trust, especially if it's in a life insurance policy. So this is double, triple firewalls of protection by keeping your equity up here in a max funded insurance contract, and better yet, in an Alaska Trust. The same thing is true if you have your IRAs or 401ks, and you can put that in an Alaska Trust if you have a lot of assets. So this is the kind of structure that savvy CPAs and tax attorneys create. And frankly, I have some sophisticated clients that have multiple limited partnerships, LLCs, and multiple index universal life policies to create all these firewalls of protection so that you can almost make your assets invisible, because they cannot do asset searches when they're going after an LLC or a condo or an apartment complex, or if somebody got hurt behind your boat or using your jet ski, and they sue you for that, the most they can get is what's in that LLC. They can't even find out what's up here. So you make your assets almost invisible. But even if they could find out what is up here, try to go get it. This is asset protection. So if you want to learn how to do this, first of all, I would recommend you learn how to protect your assets by setting up a properly structured indexed universal life insurance contract. And then if you want to be introduced to attorneys that will help you set up this structure if you have a lot of assets, I can point you to the right ones who will do that. But start out, claim your free copy of my book, The Laser Fund. Simply go to laserfund.com or click on the link below. You contribute a nominal amount toward the shipping and handling. I'll cover the rest of that cost. I require some skin in the game, but I'll pay for the book. I'll fire out a hard copy to you via priority mail. But when you're in there claiming your free copy of this 300-page book, If you like to listen and learn or watch and learn, there's audio and video formats available. You can schedule to attend free educational webinars that we do on a regular basis. You can even schedule an appointment with an IUL specialist at no cost or obligation to see how these may be beneficial for you in your particular set of circumstances, and you can begin to engage with the relationship. And if your attorney does not know how to do this, I can point you to an attorney who does, because I'm not an attorney, but I do train attorneys on how to do this if they don't know how. This is about you and protecting your assets and making them almost invisible in the sue happy society that we unfortunately have become.